Arnav, hi, good to have you with us. How have you been?
Hi, I've been very good. Thanks for having me here. I've been
Arnav,
very good. Yeah,
excited to have you with us, right? I think wearable is something as a space it's exploded. I think as a country we've become just so much more conscious about what we eat and what we do, right? And I think wearables is something which is just plugged in that gap beautifully, right? It used to be inconsistent. I think they've brought in a certain seriousness, in our lifestyle in a certain form and way, right? We become very, very calibrated in many ways, right? And the brilliance is that this is not a tier A city phenomenon, right? I think this is something which is seeing a pan India level, right? Of course, we are at a distance. We'd love to cover all of this through the course of the conversation, right? I'm sure your observations, understanding, and the consumer behavior is we're gonna have a great story by the end of this conversation. Arnav, good to have you with us. I'd love to start this conversation with a quick round of introduction about yourself, about what is it that you've done in the past, and we move into the Firebolt conversation there.
great. Thanks, Ashu. I'm pretty sure that we'll have a lovely conversation now. So, just to introduce myself, I'm Arnav Kishore, co-founder and CEO of Fireboltt. Bolt was incepted back in 2015, and before Bolt, I was involved in a fast fashion lifestyle brand. My co-founder Ayushi is my sibling, and both of us, co-founded the brand in 2015. That's when the journey began.
Right.
I was a lawn tennis. I was a professional lawn tennis player for about 16 years.
Wow.
And a professional athlete. I was very heavily into fitness. I was a tech freak. I used to be fond of all the new technologies that used to come, and in 2015 I saw a gap, and that's where the idea of Bolt came in, where we kind of wanted to create a solution that could help athletes track their health and fitness better. So we tied up with Garmin, as our first technology partner, and the first product that we launched was a smart shoe. Very interesting. Back then there were not many smart shoes in the market, right? So it was the first of a kind product that we launched, and soon after that, so first 2 to 3 years was we were heavily into product development around coming up with trackers that could help track your running, your motion, your gait, your cadence, and all of that. And I think in the last few years our product and business model has really evolved. And in 2020 is when we rechristened the brand to be called Fireboltt. And Fireboltt is today India's #1 wearable watch brand. So we specialize in smart watches, and all sorts of smart watches to track personal health and fitness. So just
Super.
short that. Yeah.
Super. And I completely kind of resonate and agree with that. I think the most visible brand out there, and I think the most diverse brand, right, in terms of its catalog and offering, right, clearly is Fireboltt, right. Now I'm not going to take it away from the others in the market, right, but I think the aggression is something which is I think the way you kind of dissect the market, right, in terms of your positioning, right, men, women, that kind of target, right? I think very, very agile, right? If I can put it that way. And the other thing is that it's a fast-moving catalog, right? So I continue to see a lot of new models, right? I mean, this is an exciting space. We've been tracking it, and I think that's an observation that we've had. Adam, I'm gonna continue to talk about the early part of Fireboltt coming together, right? Now this is essentially the time that you kind of started, and the kind of time that you were enjoying this, right? It was possibly considered to be, at least perceptively, right, a big boys game. And when I say a big boys game, you had the Fitbits of the world. Apple had kind of entered this, right? Nike was into a wearable. They had a beautiful bag around them, right? A tracker. So this is basically considered to be a slightly more big boys game, right? And essentially, nobody really knew how seriously would this be possibly adopted, right? Besides, Fitbit, right, which was actually fighting it out pretty independently, right? We had a bunch of others, Koki and a bunch of others, which come from the Indian market. But I think the market was still not very, very clear. The agility that is required in the consumer was still not very clear, right? How was that phase, right? Because, you literally saw a leap of faith. For a Nike or for any large brand to piggyback on their existing, affiliation with the consumer is just so much more easier, right? For a standalone brand to come up, it just becomes a very, very different ballgame, right? A couple of others tried to sort of solve it with this entire ecosystem that they kind of built, right? And that became the enticing part, possibly. How was that for you, right? I think, I would love to understand, that granularity that you achieved, during this process, because there's just so much which was happening, right? Everybody was trying to cut this market in a different way, offer in a different way. bring in that uniqueness, right? Tell us a little more about that.
Sure. I think very, very interesting question. So I'll tell you a little bit about our struggles early in the
Sure.
days. So when we started off, the first, what you see today, in a short summary, I'll basically say that in the last 6 quarters, so in the
Right.
last 18 months, only in the last 18 months, we've climbed up the ladder to become the number one brand. And why that has happened is because there's a entire 6-year journey behind it that people don't get to see. So, you're absolutely right that smart watches, wearables is a big boys game. And but having said that, I think back in 2015, when we started off, the market was very small. The base was very small. There was very little awareness around why, and why should someone have a wearable. And the common problem of, someone buying a wearable and then dumping it in their drawer after 2 weeks of use was the biggest problem, So, we kind of took a very bold step in terms of, building an entire ecosystem around it. We had an AI-based app, something, like a mixture of Goki and Healthify Me, which is to give AI-based, virtual coaching, automated coaching to the users, and so on and so forth. And I think today, the speed at which Fireboltt has grown as a brand can be, there are a couple of reasons why that's happened. Number one, we're hitting the budget segment. So all the big brands like a Fitbit, Garmin, or a Samsung today are there. They're there in the premium segment of the market. But India as a market, as you would know, is a very budget conscious market, right? So we and most of the consumers today who are looking to buy a wearable, they're kind of experiencing a smartwatch or a wearable for the first time. So it becomes more important to have your product range kind of starting from the rock bottom, right? So we've what we've done is we've launched certain products in certain categories within wearables which are extremely affordable and kind of have those specs and those capabilities in the watch which even a Samsung or an Apple Watch have. So it kind of gets you the best of the features at the best price points, and that's why today we've kind of carved out. So Fireboltt is the brand that's actually thought of wearables as a market in a very different way. We don't the underlying use case of health and fitness was the primary use case why people used to buy, but we've kind of looked beyond that, and we've tried to carve out the use case to be much larger than only health and fitness. So now it's become if you see people today, everyone from all types of classes are now wearing a watch. I in my personal experience, I was traveling, I was at the airport, I saw like these security guards wearing the Fireboltt smartwatches. I was at a dentist, I saw the clerk sitting at the dentist office wearing a watch. The PA in my office also is wearing a watch. So it's like literally you're seeing anyone and everyone today catching up onto the trend, and it's become a part of your lifestyle. So it's become a lifestyle accessory, a fashion accessory, and health and fitness is one of the use cases that comes along with it.
Interesting.
So I think what as a homegrown brand, what we're trying to do here is trying to get a wearable for the masses, for people who are experiencing a wearable for the first time, and then in their upgrade journey, once they buy a wearable for let's say 3,000 rupees and they want to upgrade to a one which is for like 6,000, 7,000, we have enough options in our portfolio for them to upgrade as well. So I think in short, that's what
Interesting. Arnav, that's a very interesting point that you highlighted, right? I think in a way you kind of made a comment on how the market, for example, is evolved, right? How the aspiration is kind of shifted, right? Now, I classically believe that 2020 has been a very, very defining sort of moment, right? Something that has had a very strong rub off on largely all D2C brands across all categories, right? In your case, there's an added seriousness, largely because health was a priority, right, for a lot of people, in many ways, right? And I'd love to understand, the way you're positioning this, right? The consumer perception around, when you have the larger voice playing the game, right? You're certain about, say, certain quality. And India is a very perceptive market in that sense, right? Ki mehenga hai to acha hai. That's something which goes, right? Now you've kind of challenged that, you've changed that, right? What is that shift that you saw, right? What's been your observation in the market, right? Would love to understand that. What worked for you in that this journey of 18 months that you kind of highlighted, right? What worked for you? Because price pointing is not an advantage anymore, right? I mean, you have financing available. There are enough of fintech that have come in, which are right, left, and center. They're lending you so much more easily, right? That is a smaller barrier, right? What worked for you? From positioning standpoint, from a communication standpoint, I'd like to understand which are the regions that actually work for you. Would be great if you could highlight that.
Sure. So I think our strategy overall in terms of positioning the brand and coming out with the first set of products that we launched,
Sure.
There were certain differentiators that helped us really develop our positioning in the market. I'll quote an example here. So we were the first brand to launch a smartwatch with SpO2 back in, right during the COVID time, when the whole awareness was coming about. We launched the first watch. There was no other watch in the market with SpO2 at that point in time in the budget segment, right? That helped us really gain momentum into this category. From there on, Fireboltt has consistently delivered industry first features in every launch that we've done. So we launched the first Bluetooth calling watch. Bluetooth calling as a category for almost a year and a half. We were the only brand that was offering a wide variety of Bluetooth calling watches in which you could answer and receive calls. It has an inbuilt mic and speaker and so on. We launched the first AMOLED watch under 10K. This was a watch we launched at about 7,499. And this watch was giving a tough challenge to watches even in the price point of 14,000, 15,000 price bracket, right?
Yeah.
Amazon had told us that you're launching a watch which is above 5,000. It's unheard of in the Indian ecosystem. No one has done that. And if you manage to pull this off, your brand will go to a different level. And that's exactly what happened. We launched that watch. It came with an inbuilt 8 gigabyte storage with about 200 plus watch faces, Bluetooth calling, AMOLED, and like a bunch of different features, right? Very power packed watch. And that kind of helped us, understand that the customers in India are not only budget conscious. There's a big audience out there wanting to spend the money to get something premium, and
aspiration is taking over.
Aspiration, yes, that's right. So I think the whole philosophy here now is that we've carved out 3 different segments, right? One is a budget segment, which is called Fireboltt Ninja. So if you see the Fireboltt Ninja series is all around your great build and great design, but having said that, it comes with all your basic features to track your health and fitness. And then as you go up the ladder in terms of Bluetooth calling capabilities, in terms of the AMOLED range, very soon we'll be coming out with an Android range. So there's a entire ecosystem that we're building around smartwatches, right from the customer that's looking that's a budget conscious customer to someone who's looking to get something as premium as an Apple Watch, right? So we have a very wide offering in that respect.
Interesting. Now, Arnav, I'd love to talk to you a lot about branding therapy. I mean, we've touched upon that, right, in a certain common way. How several features have helped you build that relationship, right? And being safe first, to offer them, I think the timing is really work for you. But I think we're getting back to normal now. Now, when you talk of building a brand, right, in India, you expect a lot of consistency, right? Now, in the environment that you are in, right, which is digital, which is so much more transparent, right? I mean, at the ease of pretty much a click, I can discover, or what is available, right? And you have marketplaces which give you access into a variety of other insights and information, right? A lot of user-based feedback and so forth, right? Now, one thing which is common, right, across D2C brands as a whole, right? And I'd love you to sort of comment more on the wearable side, is there is a certain sense of deep discovery, right? Now, how does that play out, right? Or how has that played out for you? Is what I want to understand, right? Does that? I at least come from a zone where if it's deeply discounted, I have a very slightly different perception of mine. I'm like, is this working? Is this not working? Why is there such a deep discount? If it's a great product, right? If I'm a feature-based buyer at that price point, right? Help me understand this a little more, right? How is that deep discounting working for you, right? Is that in the longer term damaging the brand? Or is that a small hack that you've put together right now to build these inroads and that relationship, right? Eventually people getting hooked onto the brand and then your possibility to upsell. My sense is when you're looking at deep discounting, when you're comparing features across, say, other brands, right? You're largely in a commoditized zone. You're just like, this is 500 more and this is 500 less, right? Which is the one I go for and this is the one I choose for, right? I have a clouded view as far as that is concerned, right? Is that the right strategy to do? Because, that's something which gets splashed out the most, right? Across the communication that's there. What's your sense of it? How do you do that?
So I think, you're right. The problem is that in the online ecosystem, deep discounting is something you can't really do without.
Sure.
It kind of most of the brands today in the online space specifically will have to follow this strategy if they have to kind of come to the top. So how in our case, we're not really deep discounting any of the products. The pricing strategy is in such a way where the MRP is always let's say a little higher than the selling price, right? So the discount percentage comes out like that. But having said that, the way we have kind of priced our products, they're intentionally kept extremely affordable. That's like the ideology behind the brand, that we want to give cutthroat prices with the best specs and pass on that price benefit to the customer, right? And I think your previous statement in terms of how you go about building a brand, I think it's a much larger game than only selling online. Today, anyone can come and start selling online. It doesn't take too much time, for you to build your online vintage. But what does take time and what does help you make the brand eventually is offline. So for us, in Fireboltt, we've taken offline as a channel, with utmost sincerity since day one. So for us, even today, 50% of our business is coming from offline channels. We're present across 750 plus cities. We are selling in about 30,000 plus retail shops in India right now, and the target is to cross about 100,000 this year. So eventually it's offline as a channel is a very tough channel to crack. And but in the long run it does give you results, because the pricing is much more kind of well established there, and there is not too much of a discounting game happening there. So we have a separate line for our offline partners, we have a separate line for our online channels. Online, because of the entire the way in which online works, we have to kind of price it in that way. But I think both combined, you kind of get the volumes that we expect. The only way to do that is to kind of develop separate lines and go deep, right?
Interesting.
So yeah.
Interesting. That's a very interesting take. Arnav, I haven't come across that one, right? And I have had quite a few D2C discussions, right? And that's largely because what you're doing online, you want to have a continuity to it in an offline setting, right? I think what you're alluding to is very different, right? I think the only brand which I've seen doing that very, very sharply is Samsung, right? At least in the electronic space, where they have a very different line of products that they're selling online, and something very, very different in an offline setting, right? I think offline is very experiential in nature, right? That they're doing out of their stores. Online is something which is very transactional, flash sales model, or there's a certain sense of urgency that they're trying to create, and you want to sort of as a consumer go out and buy very, very quickly, right? Now I'm going to move on to some very interesting points that you've made, right? I'd love to cover some of these experiential engagement points in just a bit, right? But before I do that, I'd love to talk to you about India, right? Now you present across 750 locations, right? Like you said, in an offline setting, right? Now India, when you classically talk to founders, right, and especially in the product space, the consumer market space, right? There's a certain sense of homogeneity which they are essentially banking on, right? And that just gives them the continuity and essentially helps them build a better LTV to CAC or help them control CACs, right? Because there's a certain consistency across the regions that you see, right? Now, in a game like this, when you are present across all of these regions, right? While there's homogeneity, right? Because there's health and there's seriousness around health, right? The communication changes, right? Because all of these finer nuances get communicated in different ways, right? How have you been able to master that? I'd love to understand that.
No, so I think very interesting question. India is, extremely diverse.
Right.
When we travel to our offline locations, meet up with our offline partners, we realize that when we look at India as one, that's where we're wrong. India is so diverse that you have to literally think. For example, Tamil Nadu is not a state; it's actually a country. Similarly, Gujarat is not a state; it's a country. So, the taste, the kind of language they speak, the kind of the local connect which we need to develop, for the brand. That's the hard part. So even today, what we're trying to do is we're really trying to localize the experience as much as possible, even to the extent where we're trying to get different wearables for different markets. We're trying to, for example, in some south regions, we're trying to come up with certain colors, with certain watch faces, that are very specific to South, to get that local connect. We're getting some local celebrities across different regions to get that local connect again. The way in which we're running our Facebook and Google ads, our performance ads every day, even that's being completely localized to the city level, to the pin code levels. So I think when we talk about offline, when we talk about online, both the things, we're kind of making sure that we're going really local. We're trying to develop the entire line, keeping in mind the connect with the local people.
Very interesting. I'd love you to put out some observations that's really surprised you, right? That this is one facet of India that you never knew, right? And I think that's true for not just you. I think that's true for each one of us, right? India is a surprising market. What's that one bit? I'd love to sort of capture that here in this conversation, right? If it surprised you, wow, this is something that we never knew was prevalent or existed, right? And this is that India, which doesn't necessarily comes up in very many conversations, right? What's been that moment? Has there been a moment?
I think till about a year back, when I used to think of India and how we should kind of make our strategy for both online and offline. I was surprised, when I actually traveled to that particular state. It was in Hyderabad. We had a meetup with some of our local partners there, and it kind of opened my eyes to the level where there were some. We had a kind of a retailer meet, right? So there were a lot of retailers who came from the entire South Belt and regions, and they came in. First it was me lecturing them about what Wearables is, blah blah blah, and they were like, "Sir, let us take the stage." And then they explained to me that your strategy is completely wrong. There are 4 different languages in South, and the moment you start traveling to these 4 regions, you'll realize that they're so far apart from each other that your one strategy will not work here. So you have to really think completely local. Go to the level of the towns and the cities, and kind of then develop your marketing plans around it. So that it's not only for South, but even for East, West, different parts of India. It goes for every place, right? So that's one thing as a brand we've learned, that while there's homogeneity, but at the same time it's very important to treat each and every state as if it's a country, and then you'll get the results. Then you will end up going deep and kind of getting that right visibility across all the places.
Interesting. Now, Arnav, what we've seen is possibly the wave one, right, of adoption when it comes to wearables, right? And while there have been early leaders, a lot of other brands have now kind of come up, right? I think in a way the market is now aware, right? The journey from here on gets difficult, right? Those new features, for example, get difficult, right? For example, design has to now kind of change, right? This is that territory, this is that terrain, which is literally the unknown, right? What's your sense of it, right? How are you looking to sort of track that? Because, like you said, the office boy is wearing it, people at the police station are wearing it, people at the security agency are wearing it. So it's now gotten down to that level, right? I mean, the bottom of the pyramid, not really the bottom of the pyramid in that sense, right? But, that is essentially the lowest of the late adopters, right? You cracked that, right? And that's the adoption is happening.
Yeah.
What's next, right? I mean, how are you calibrating yourselves for the next phase of this? And a follow-up question of that is that, how do you defend yourself? So, for example, R&D is something which is so much more critical to what you're doing, right? Now that happens through your lab setup and observations in the market, right? Now, because the competition is already there, in the sense they've prepared themselves, they've optimized their supply chain, they've optimized their reach to the consumer. A lot of what you do gets commoditized very quickly because they're possibly in a position to identify the success of those features or those variations that you bring to the market and replicate them very quickly. Your abnormal profits, the possibility of abnormal profits, the possibility of building that engagement is very, very short-term. How do you defend yourself in the process? Would love to understand that.
Okay. So, first of all, smartwatch as a product, you must understand, is a very complex product. It's as complex as a mobile phone or a smartphone today.
Sure.
And the second part to this is, the way in which, if you remember, in 2010, when the smartphone boom came, suddenly from feature phones, everyone, shifted to a smartphone, and there was a big wave, that kind of massive offtake of smartphones in the industry. A very similar phase has now come into smartwatches, and this is just the beginning. Mark my words, like right now, the time that we're sitting in, this is just the starting of that wave of the new era of smartwatches. We like to quote that every smartphone user out there will eventually end up wearing a smart wearable, right? So you can imagine the level of the market. If there are 100 crore Indians using a smartphone today, eventually everyone will wear a smartwatch. Now, as the market grows and as it becomes hotter by the day, there will be more brands that try and come and take a piece of the pie. Right. But it's not going to be easy for everyone to crack this, because you need to have a certain level of specialization DNA into one category. Today, if I wish to say that I want to start making TVs, it's not my forte. We can't do that. We have to stick to what we've been doing. So Fireboltt in India is back in 2015 when we launched our first fitness bands and trackers. At that point in time, there was no other brand apart from one or two, like a Xiaomi or a Goki. It was only Bolt at that point in time. And so we've been doing this since a very long time. We've learned a lot in our journey in the last 6 years in terms of the right ingredients of having a wearable along with an app, an entire ecosystem, how it all functions. We've developed the expertise to develop the hardware where the smartwatch will have a display, a PCBA, an OS, a chipset. We are even engineering products to a level where we're coming out with our own chipset in the near future. So there are a lot of pieces that unlike other categories, like for example audio is a fairly simpler category to crack. So I think in about 2 years back, the market level, as per IDC, India was about at a 2 million units yearly. Last year, we closed at about 12 million units, and FY23 we are anticipating to cross maybe 20 million, and the rate at which it's going, I won't be surprised if we actually end up hitting more than 30 million units in India itself, right? So the market is growing in such a way that there will be more brands coming into this category. What will keep us ahead of the race is basically continuing and being consistent at what we're doing right. So we've kind of mastered the art of identifying the gaps in the market at each and every price point. We are able to get the right specifications, right innovations, and be ahead of the market at any given point in time. So we're coming out with products exclusively for different platforms. We have very, very strong supply chains in place, and that's what has really helped us to within a very short time create such a big brand. So
interesting.
I think that's what
interesting. Arnav, I think one facet of your journey which we've not talked about, right? I think this is a never-ending conversation, right? I think a founder's journey is possibly the most exciting thing. I think next to a movie almost, right? Or a great story that continues to intrigue you, right? And continues to sort of excite you at many levels, right? And I think each point has a very different, nuance, depth that one can learn from and understand, right? Now, in your journey, Arnav, you've chosen to be a bootstrap entrepreneur, right? And I wanted to specifically bring this question at this point, right? All of what you've done is essentially, has been managed by, by bringing in, funds by yourself or the family, right? It's kind of contributed to your journey. It just brings in a very different kind of a sensitivity, right? When you're working on external funds, right, investor-backed companies, right, operate in a very different way, right? You do things, you break things, you remake them, but all of that can happen a little off clinic, right? You can kind of be dispassionate about what you're doing, right? But in this case, it just becomes so much different, right? The possibility of failure is very, very little. You want to get it right every single time. You cannot experiment a lot, right? Which limits your creativity to a certain extent, right? You possibly, because of say lack of those resources or funds, means that you'll have to optimize yourself very, very well, right? You'll have to prioritize your markets very carefully, right? There are a lot of those elements that come in. How's that been for you? And why do I ask you that question, Arnav, is because you entered a space which was, predominantly by a lot of big boys, something that we discussed through the course of it, right? And building a credible brand just takes so much more effort, right? This just becomes, and you are at a certain stage, right? It becomes an important point to understand, because while of course it's you want to capture this in the conversation, I think it's going to help a lot of people understand that great businesses can be built. When you bring in that, for example, the mix is right, and that's the reason I want to capture.
No, so I think in your question, you've already kind of summarized most of the elements in my answer, and I think you're absolutely right. Ashu, I think the pain with which you can build a bootstrap business is going to be any day far more exciting and challenging at the same time compared to a fully funded company, right? So we've as promoters, both me and Ayushi, we are very hands-on involved in each and every work that's happening in the company, right? We've tried to keep the team structure as lean as possible, getting the right people at the right places, and sort of still being involved in the smallest of the things every day, because we cannot afford to make those mistakes which probably other brands could right now at this stage. So it's been a very exciting yet challenging journey in the last 6 years. Lot of ups and downs we've seen in the last 6 years, but that's the whole excitement. When you're doing things with money out of your own pocket, you feel the pinch for each and everything. One mistake you do can take you far behind. So it's far more important to perfect each and everything that we do. Experiment less, but do those experiments in whatever we do in the right way. And even today, if today we've been able to, in FY22 we did about 500 crores in revenue. This year we're already at a run rate of about 1500 crores, right? And sooner or later, maybe in the next year or so, we might look at getting some strategic people on board, in the form of external investments, right? To really scale up and go to the next level. But I think till now, the journey that's been, we wouldn't have been able to reach here if it wasn't, the entire, if the business wasn't being driven like the way it is. And I think that's been a conscious decision from our side, that we don't want any external interventions to come into our business right now, because the business is at such a stage where we need our operational freedom. We need the freedom to do things the way we feel, and as founders, nobody will know and be able to see the vision like the way we do, right? So I think it's been a mix of all these things. That's really,
I know, that's so heartening to hear that, right? That's so heartening to hear that. My sense is, and I think this is something which I think across this entire conversation, while we've discussed a lot of points, I think this is one point that a lot of people should take back home, right? At least, and absorb, because it's just so much more important, right? When you're out there to do something, right? Which is challenging, I think you need that creative sensibility, right? And I think that freedom is very, very important in the process. Right choices and prudence helps you get to the kind of numbers that you kind of talked about, right? But I think that entire element of creativity is just so much more important, right? I think that just goes on to build the DNA and helps you command a very different kind of a premium in the market, right? In the process, right? That's very interesting. And up towards the end of a conversation, right? You've had a spectacular journey. You've been at it for a very long time. The brand is visible. There is a certain following, right? Vis-a-vis many others that exist. You kind of lead the charts, right? You've become a customer well in the process. What are the next 2.5 years like? I'd love to ask you a 5-year question, but I think it's just too far in the future to talk a 5-year question. What are the next 2.5 years like? I'd love to understand that. Also, is there a plan of, or am I going to say to a graduate extension? You've possibly done that in the past, but more aggressively so, right? What is the kind of ecosystem that you're building around, the wearable ecosystem that you have? Any new products, a revenue milestone that you've set for yourself? I'd love you to, cover all of that.
Sure. So, if in 18 months we've been able to become India's #1 wearable watch brand, in the next 18 months, or let's say in the next 2 years, the goal is to become globally #1 in wearables. So it's a very bold statement I'm making, but that's the target that we've set upon ourselves, to now get the tag of a homegrown Indian brand becoming world's #1 in terms of the wearable watches, right? And we feel we can do that. We have the right ingredients. In terms of a revenue milestone, yes, this year we're looking to close at about 1500 crores only from wearables. In the next 2 years, the target is to hit $1 billion in revenue. So that's again, it's a big jump that I'm talking about, but it's doable. given the fact that we have a lot of expansion plans, very soon we will be starting to go global. We have shortlisted about 10 different countries. We'll be going through Amazon in the first phase and then entering into offline. But the sheer volume that we can get from all the other countries combined can really take us to a different level. In terms of ecosystem, we're working on some very interesting things in terms of having an entire layer of one is the health tracking site, where we have plans to unveil a bunch of different apps that can connect with all your wearables. It can really give you a very detailed analysis on your daily health and fitness. There'll be an AI coach element also over there. Subscription based model that we kind of rolling out soon. Apart from that, we have an app which is called the Bolt Play app. That's essentially a gamification, it's like a rewards ecosystem where as a user you will be gratified for every step you take. So for every 10,000 steps you take, you'll be gratified with Bolt coins, which you can redeem to win yourself exciting prizes and merchandise from many of the top brands in the country. So it's like a very that problem that I was talking about, that you end up dumping your wearable after 2 weeks of use. We're trying to address that by adding a lot of different sort of elements to it for you to stay more engaged. In terms of our product roadmap, we plan to also get into many different segments now. Till now, most of our watches have been unisex. Now we plan to really, enter into the women's category by coming out with a very fashion-focused line around women's. We plan to have some women, specific brand ambassadors on board. We're also working on getting, entering into the kids segment. Now, kids as a segment is going to really grow in the next few years, where parents can track with the GPS on their on the kids' watch, where are they, all of that. So a lot of exciting use cases that are coming. Also, home automation. So we're kind of unlocking capabilities of IoT, with the watch, where you can really control parts of your home. Also, maybe connected with your car. With the automotive, use cases. So a lot of exciting use cases within the, smartwatches that are getting unlocked every day. And in the next 1 year, we will all see, in India, that the entire, base level of what technology is for wearables will completely change, and that's how, that's both a good thing and a bad thing. The bad thing is that, products are becoming obsolete very, very quickly. The cycle of going to market with new innovations is becoming much faster. Something similar to smartphones. You see, in terms of smartphones, every day some brand or the other is coming out with, new and innovative, features. So very similar to that in smartwatches, many more different categories will start to unfold, and many new features within that also. So yeah.
Interesting. Arnav, what I'm particularly excited about, a hardware will always will continue to be hardware, right? That's how I kind of look at it. Yeah. In my limited understanding, right? But I think the ecosystem around it kind of makes it exciting. And I think this kind of flurry of specific features and this indented sort of knack towards, say, for example, women, kids, men, age brackets, right? I think it's really gonna. I think the market is gonna be very, very different, right? Possibly a lot more evolved. The good part is that there's this paying appetite which is coming, right? I think a lot of that possibly game starts to play out for you. And in general, I think that's a market tendency which is starting to build in the last 2.5 years. Enough. Last question in this conversation, right? Now, very cliched, right? But I still want to ask this question, right? Every founder has a very unique journey. He or she has their own, learnings in the process. Something that they can, pass on to others, right? And that might just become, that hack or trick in their playbook of sorts, right? Or possibly in the survival guide, right? In a bad time. If you were to give out one which has worked for you, right? What would that be? I'd love to close this conversation on that note.
Okay, the line I will say might sound cliche, but I think do what you love what you do. I think this is the motto by which I am working every day, and I feel if someone incorporates this in their daily journey, they will get success, because both go hand in hand. If you're doing something that you love, you'll do it with passion. You'll spend more time in it. You will find ways to get the maximum out of it. In our, even for us in Firebolt, numbers and all, revenue, etc. is one thing that we
Right.
look at. But the larger thing we look at is it's really driving us every day, because we are very passionate about it. We're really enjoying what we do as a team over here, and that's what keeps us going. So the last 6 years would not have been possible for us if I was not working with this motto in mind. So I think for everyone out there, I would like to pass on the same message, that it's very important to do what you love and love what you do. If these two things are there, you're pretty much going to kill it.
Interesting. Arnav, this was an absolutely spectacular conversation. By the end of these conversations, how I don't want these conversations to end, right? And that's largely because, there's just so much of insight, right? India is not an easy market. It's a very, very difficult market, right? I mean, I think it's like, driving in those rushed lanes, right? If you do it right there, you can possibly do it wherever. But I think it has a lot of learning in the process. For many others. I would have loved to capture a lot of operating aspects, in this conversation, but I'm going to save some of that for our next conversation. And it was an absolutely spectacular, play to have you with us in this conversation, talk about macros. I think when you look at a distance, Wearables is something that, you're looking at just as a buyer, right? But I think what you highlighted is how it possibly is going to go on to become so much more integrated in the process, right? We possibly buy it at that moment where we're looking at that feature, right? That becomes a trigger to sort of purchase it, right? But I think with this now ecosystems that are coming together, it becoming as integrated as possibly a phone is, and as weaved into the activities that we do and the possibility of tracking and so on and so forth. I think it's going to be a very, very different relationship that we're going to have, right? Possibly as dynamic as it is with boats, right? And a lot of that. And it was absolutely amazing to have you with us. Thank you so much for doing this, and look forward to having you with us much sooner and doing a more focused conversation on the operating aspect and dissecting the Indian markets better. Thank you so much for doing this.
Thanks, Ashu. The pleasure was all mine, and I really look forward to more conversations like this in the future, where we can really talk about many more things. But I think this conversation was very, very nice, and thank you so much for having me here.
Thank you, Arnav.